The media focus on Senator Obama's victory is giving way to the historical legacy of President Bush over the past 8 years. At present, Bush's own political standing is far from a triumph. The still unfinished wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have drawn widespread condemnation at home and overseas, despite the fact that Iraq is now on the verge of a miraculous peace. In a stable atmosphere, Iraqi military and police forces fully control 13 of Iraq's 18 provinces. And in the month before Election Day, American combat deaths matched the lowest monthly total of the entire war. This accomplishment did little to revive Bush's abysmally low standing, and the economy in this country could only add to the bitterness. Since the economic crisis in the fall of this year, the President has called for responsible government intervention in the markets and managed to get a $850 billion bailout plan approved. But this move was also received with heavy criticism. Critics say George W. Bush will go down in American history as the worst president. Will history vindicate him in the end? Only time will tell.
Joining us now here in the Beijing studio are Jessica Matthews, President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and her colleague, Mr. Douglas Powell, Vice President for Studies, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Welcome to Dialogue. To start with, let's look at the Bush administration's China policy. Now, the most thorny and sensitive issue in our bilateral relationship should be Taiwan. But it seems the tensions are being relaxed with the campaign victory of the KMT, the former biggest opposition party. Now Ma Ying-jeou takes the office. What do you think of the Bush policy towards Taiwan?
Well, Bush has started out in 2000 with a desire to be a strong supporter for Taiwan, for its separation from China. He arranged for a large arms package to be presented in April 2000, and by the time that Mr. Chen Shui-bian came to the end of his term of office in May, relations had deeply worsened between the United States and Taiwan. Trust was lost. The arms package hadn't been passed by the Taiwan legislature, and in fact, Washington became the voice of Beijing in many circumstances in urging the people of Taiwan to reject Chen Shui-bian's policies and to support a maintenance of the status quo in the Taiwan Strait.
One more question about Taiwan. Do you think U.S. presidents since Jimmy Carter have been able to maintain their consistency over the cross-strait relations, namely opposing any unilateral change of the status quo and the strategic ambiguity implied there?
That's been fairly consistent. We've had Ronald Reagan at one time wanted to change policy at the beginning of his administration, but he returned to the main course. President Bush tried to make a change, but he returned to the main course. If you look at the other side of the strait, Bill Clinton in his early days tried to change the direction of China policy, but he returned to the main course of the 7 administrations. So that each of 7 administrations concluded the direction of policy was essentially the same.
Despite our close collaboration over the issue of the denuclearization process in the divided Korean Peninsula, I think the launch of ICED, namely Strategic Economic Dialogue, should be hailed as yet another landmark achievement in the bilateral relationship between Washington and Beijing. What do you think of the functions and the purpose of the ICED?
I think the Bush administration has to be congratulated for trying to broaden the relationship and deepen it in lots of different dimensions, and the ICD is certainly one of the most important. So this has been important, and my guess would be that the next administration will continue with it because it's been very constructive.
The Europeans are very jealous of this senior level dialogue, but what do you think of the mechanism of the SED?
I think this financial crisis that we're now in proves the value of the SED. Secretary of Treasury Paulson picks up the phone and regularly calls Vice Premier Wang Qishan. He regularly speaks with Zhou Xiaochuan.
And prior to that, he regularly called Madame Wu Yi.
That's right? Correct. But that kind of communication, and not just at his level, but at every level below of all those participating in this strategic economic dialogue, has allowed for direct communication and I think has produced tangible results, seen just this past week with the Chinese announcement of a stimulus package that was intended to keep China's economy moving forward and contribute to avoiding a deeper international economic recession.
But the rapid development or re-emergence of China is viewed in the U.S. with a mixed feeling, with some saying, look, this will pose a grave threat to the U.S. For example, half a century from now, China will definitely become yet another superpower, a major rival for the global dominance of the U.S. On the other hand, some would say we have to engage China as a major responsible stakeholder. Now, Robert Zoellick put forward this novel idea, and I'm afraid this principle or option has been accepted by policymakers in both Europe and North America. What do you think of for example, the first voice, which says China would be a threat?
That's always there. There will always be a stream of that in the United States.
Because we're talking about the legacy of the Bush administration over the past 8 years. What do you think of the Bush mindset? What do you think of the thrust of his policy towards this issue?
I think the main thrust has been very constructive, has not been dominated by a sense of fear in this relationship. And it stands out, I think, among the Bush legacy as an area where the effort was to build a very constructive and closer relationship than. And
Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense, refused to visit Beijing until quite a few months ago, before he was fired due to the midterm election in the Capitol Hill. That's a reflection of the anger of the electorate about the Iraq war. But that has somehow reflected the strong voice of the neocons. What do you think of the concerns of the neocons with regard to the China policy?
Well, people known for holding neocon views would put the concern about the future threat from China ahead of the constructive engagement approach to China. But that's just one segment of American thinking. Both, as Ms. Matthews has just said, both will be present. Both the engagement and the hedging or the concern about the future will be present until we get 50 years from now and we see what the outcome is. The question is, will we allow our fears to get in the way of our constructive cooperation? And so far that has not happened.
Why the theory of constructive engagement is taking the upper hand? That issue is the six-party talks. What do you think of this very huge effort initiated perhaps by China, one of the six parties, in denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think it is one of the first cases where we were able to work on a very difficult and very delicate issue together over a period of time. We certainly haven't succeeded yet. We haven't solved the problem by any means. But we've come, I think, a fair distance. And it's showed the way that the two countries can work together. So it's an important precedent in that respect.
With the end of the Cold War, and particularly the 9/11 incident, one of the major concerns of the Bush administration has been the prevention of a proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. That's one of the major reasons for launching the war against Iraq.
I'm an expert on proliferation, have been for 25 years, and when we looked at the data, we did not see an imminent threat. And more importantly, we saw a way to find out if there was such a threat through coercive inspections, through inspection regime that would force the Iraqis to disclose whatever they had. And I think the fact that the Bush administration wouldn't wait for inspections either to succeed or to fail is evidence that it wasn't really about
but I'm afraid that President Bush had good reasons to say his policy on preventing the proliferation prevailed over the case of Libya. But in Iran, do you think this is a major setback for President Bush? And what do you think of the double standard of the U.S. foreign policy towards nuclear arsenal in the Middle East? For example, the Israeli government has maintained its policy of ambiguity, and Egypt, as well as all other major players in the Arab world, say to guarantee complete elimination of nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. Israel must be the first in
There's no double
order.
standard there.
No double standard?
No double standard.